What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and if you're enjoying the content here on my channel, then make sure you hit the like button and make sure you hit subscribe so you can help decide what direction the content on my channel goes in the foreseeable future. Okay, so we are getting into PunisherMAX. I mean, Defenders comes out this week, and I figure what better time to start PunisherMAX than with Defenders. Either that or just like wait until November when the Punisher series comes out and drop it then. We're not gonna do that, we're gonna cover it now. Now, with regards to the first story arc in the beginning, this is actually a 6-issue story, but we're gonna cover each one of the issues individually because with PunisherMAX in the beginning basically sets the stage for how the Punisher is going to be depicted, for how gruesome PunisherMAX is gonna be. Well, not really gruesome, just really kind of like hardcore and pretty awesome. Now, here's the funny thing. If I were to not answer this question, I would get it a litany in the comments section. So we're gonna go ahead and delve with that. One of the biggest questions people ask when it comes to PunisherMAX is the story in continuity? Which is to say, is PunisherMAX part of the main Marvel universe? And so in this story where Punisher is running around killing people, spraying down mob bosses and so on and so forth, is Iron Man operating? Is Captain America there? So on and so forth. The answer to that question is not originally. PunisherMAX is most notable because it's completely absent of all the other superheroes. This entire PunisherMAX series, you will never see anybody aside from maybe like Nick Fury, and that's it. That's all you're gonna get. You're not gonna see Iron Man, you're not gonna see Captain America. This focuses exclusively on Frank Castle, but the way this was originally done, it was designed to be self-contained. With Marvel Comics, one of the things that you guys will notice is that characters never really age. Marvel uses what's called a sliding time scale. And so what Marvel will say is, okay, mutants first popped up in like 1963. Marvel kept real time until like 1985. We'll just grab that date as an example. We'll say 1985. Marvel stopped counting after 1985. And so what they do is they say it's a 10-year window, basically meaning between 1985 and whatever's happening right now, it's all happened in the span of 10 years. The original Civil War story, Maximum Security, the Infinity Gauntlet, Infinity War, all these things all happen in the span of 10 years. And in a lot of ways it works because a lot of these things happened at the same time. For example, while Civil War was going on, Annihilation was taking place out in space. The events of Infinity Gauntlet, we can largely assume those events happened over the course of a day. So there were a lot of things that go on in Marvel Comics that didn't span weeks and months or anything like that. They happened in a really short amount of time, different conflicts, battles, so on and so forth. So with regards to this whole thing, in terms of the Max series, instead of this sliding time scale where heroes never age, in Marvel Max, they age in real time. Now, the cool thing about this is that what this tells us is that the Punisher's family basically all died in 1976. And so what we know is that at the time this story is being written, which was really around 2004, I think it was, the Punisher's been operating for around 28 years. That's basically the explanation that's given to us here. Now, the cool thing about this is that, again, the Punisher's origin story is largely universal. It's like Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, the whole 9 yards. The Punisher was a guy who, worked for the police. He was involved in the Vietnam War. He eventually formed a family. The problem was that his family was killed in a mob shootout. The result is that the Punisher took it upon himself to basically fix everything. And that's the coolest thing about this. The best aspect of PunisherMAX are the monologues. He begins talking about his family being shot, about how he looked at their bodies, different things like that, and realized that the world had effectively lost its mind, but that he, as the sole man, as the sole individual, can go out and make the world sane. And so what this does is it actually switches over to a woman by the name of Catherine O'Brien. Now, Catherine O'Brien is a character that we're going to flesh out as we get further through this story, but she's basically working alongside the CIA. And so what this means is that in the almost 30 years that the Punisher has been active, he's drawn the attention of everybody. Now, if this story is to be believed as taking place in the real world, the Punisher never would have made it this long. They would have just killed him, or it would have led to some massive firefight when the cops tried to arrest him, or something along those lines. But taking this for what it is, with regards to, a little bit of the suspension of disbelief, the Punisher has effectively drawn the attention of the Central Intelligence Agency, which is basically set on a Black Ops unit, meaning the Central Intelligence Agency is operating inside the United States, which they're not supposed to do, and they have their own Black Ops team watching Frank Castle and trying to find a way to bring him down. Now, the cool thing about this is that this is just a momentary thing. This is just a quick little thing that's given to us. The greatest moment in this comic comes with a guy named Don Massimo, or at least Don Massimo Cesar. This is basically a mob boss. This guy's been running the mob for quite some time when it comes to drugs, when it comes to trafficking people, when it comes to bribery, extortion, governmental corruption, you name it, this guy's got his hands in it. The funny thing is that he's just an old guy. He's turned 100 years old. Frank Castle does not care who he targets. There's no gray area when it comes to Frank Castle, when it comes to the Punisher. You're a good guy or you're a bad guy. If you're a good guy, go on doing what you do. You be you, he'll be him. If you're a bad guy, woe betide you if Frank Castle comes knocking on your door, because he takes no prisoners. Frank Castle plays, and he plays for keeps. And so what he does is he walks into this house on the 100-year-old birthday of Don Massimo and shoots him in the head. And that's the coolest thing, because you guys notice swear words, all kinds of different stuff, but the Punisher has this great monologue where he says it's a couple of seconds to shock, where people realize that the guy just walked in and shot this mob boss. It's a couple of seconds for the anger to set in, a little bit longer for everybody to get out the door with their guns drawn, and once they're outside, Frank Castle sprays them down with an M60. And that's why this is so cool, is because in PunisherMAX, it's this and a little bit worse. It's no punches being pulled. It's no restrictions. It's no, well, you know, we won't really show it happening. We won't show the Punisher killing them off panel or anything like that. The Punisher just sprays them all down. No questions asked, no quarter given, none of that stuff. They all just die. And it's cool because the Punisher references his mindset in this moment. And that's what gives us this great insight into Frank Castle. With the world being as crazy as it is, with the world being full of corruption and evil as he sees it, the moments when he's killing the bad guys is the only time he feels sane. By all standards of measurement, Frank Castle is a crazy man. Frank Castle is a guy who lost his family and believed the only logical conclusion to that, or the only logical response, was to kill every criminal everywhere whenever he sees them, no matter what they're doing, no matter where they are, and no matter who they are. Now, Frank Castle is not a guy who'll just like run into the Capitol building, you know, and shoot corrupt politicians. It doesn't work that way. For him, it's just a matter of finding the source. And that's the nature of Frank Castle. That's the way he is. It's really one of these instances where he looks around and he says, okay, this politician's being paid. This mob boss is involved in this, but where's the source? Who's the person who started all this? You know, if I kill this drug dealer, another one's gonna take their place. If I kill this person over here, another one's gonna take their place. I'll get to them. I haven't forgotten about them. But with regards to the bigger picture, who's the person that's starting all this? That's always the way that Frank Castle works. The other half of this is he starts looking at these different guys and says, they have no idea what they're doing. Remember, Frank Castle was forged in the fires of war. The guy has fought on the front lines in a multitude of battles all during the Vietnam War. Him just showing up with an M60 and spraying these guys down, that's not enough, because these guys will run, they'll take off, they'll find employment elsewhere. They all have to die. And so what Frank Castle did was start planting all these different claymores around the place, so they would inadvertently, in their panic and in their chaos, trip these claymores and blow everybody up. Now, this is the crazy thing too, is because remember, with Frank Castle taking no quarter, he doesn't interrogate people, he doesn't ask questions, he figures it out all on his own as he goes along. And so what he ends up doing here is not only has he sprayed all these guys down with an M60, he in turn goes through every single body that he finds. If there's a man breathing, that man dies. That's how he operates. That's the brutal efficiency that he uses. So I'm hoping you guys are starting to pick up why PunisherMAX is considered to be such an amazing story, so cool in terms of how it comes together and in terms of how it functions. Now, at this point, we jump back to the CIA again. And what we do is we pick up with a guy by the name of Robert. I believe it's Robert Bethel, but he's basically the one kind of leading this operation at the moment. But the idea is that they're watching everything the Punisher does. They're watching this massacre at this mob boss's house. Now, they're basically allowing these events to unfold. They're basically building a case. But again, it really goes into the nature of the Punisher, because Frank Castle knows that there are people that are out there looking for him. Frank Castle knows that there are people out there that are hunting him down. But this is the kind of the cool thing that goes on with his character. Frank Castle is like a more extreme version of Batman. Batman uses fear to inspire those to not commit crimes. He uses fear as a deterrent to keep people from dealing drugs, from shoplifting, from stealing, you know, snatching purses, different things like that. Frank Castle is far more extreme. Batman's idea is everybody can be, you know, redeemed more or less. Everybody can be fixed. Frank Castle doesn't take that approach. People can't be fixed. And it actually makes sense. The great thing about Frank Castle is that if we looked at his character, let's take this criminal, let's take this mob boss, for example. Let's say Frank Castle were to just go in, kill all the bodyguards, and then hand the mob boss over to the police. Well, then the mob boss would get a really high-priced lawyer, and the mob boss would go through and basically be free of his case, you know, be free of his charges. And then what would he do? Go right back to doing what he was doing before. And so the idea idea is that if this mob boss is trafficking people, if he's dealing drugs, the Punisher's going through and eliminating that source. Because who of us would be willing to look at like a 7-year-old kid and say, hey, look, I'm really sorry it's, that your parents died, but this guy deserved a fair trial. Which one of us would be willing to look at a parent and say, I'm sorry that your child died, but this guy deserves a fair trial? None of us. Because if we were in that same boat, we would do the exact same thing. We do exactly what Frank Castle did. And that's why this story is so cool, is because Frank Castle is any one of us if we were in that situation. If we lost a child to a mob boss, or if we had a mob boss that was feeding all kinds of drugs and all sorts of nonsense in the neighborhoods and different things like that, a guy that's literally just a generally bad human being. That's the great thing about this. People who commit crimes, if they're dead, they can't repeat those crimes because they're dead. And so it's one of these things where the Punisher is making progress in some degree. If he sends these guys over to the cops, 2 guys are back out onto the street. But if he kills them both, that's 2 less guys on the street now. It's 2 less criminals that are out there. So again, it's extreme, it's very heavy-handed, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't work. And so again, picking up with, the whole idea of these guys, CIA and so on, what we end up doing is basically picking up with a guy named David Lieberman, I believe his name is, but he actually operates under the guise of Microchip. And Microchip was effectively the brains behind the operation of the Punisher. For years and years and years, they worked in tandem. Microchip gave the Punisher the information he needed to track down various criminals, and the Punisher would go out and get them. They just kind of worked in unison. The idea here is that Microchip has basically turncoated. He's now turned against his best friend. He's turned against Punisher for the purpose of working alongside the CIA with the intention of bringing Punisher in or else killing him on the spot. And so again, this is cool because this sets the stage for the future stories that we're going to see, how gruesome, how cruel everything can be, the no holds barred nature of the Punisher. But if you guys enjoyed this, if you guys want to see more, leave a comment down below. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and yeah, PunisherMAX, we are underway. And I will catch you all later. Peace.